Political analyst Ebrahim Harvey writes in his opinion piece about President Cyril Ramaphosa's comprehensive social compact. The idea was first mooted around 2018, but to this day, it's still to see the light of day. Now, Harvey argues that for more than 5 years, the presidency and national government have abdicated their responsibility to invest in the social compact. Ebrahim Harvey joins us now to talk more on his opinion piece. Mr. Harvey, thank you for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure to have your insights. Now, just to start off, what would you say is your analysis of an ideal social compact between a government and its people?
Well, basically, a social compact is an institutional arrangement between the so-called social partners of labor, capital, and the government, the state. And you would think that, faced with the worst, deepest crisis in the entire history of this country, particularly in post-apartheid South Africa, that Ramaphosa has indicated 2018 for 5 years now. The deeper a crisis in a country is, and we have multiple crises, converging on several fronts, the better it is if you have a social compact, because what it does, it tries to conciliate and manage the tensions and conflicts that's raging today more than ever before, which is a reflection of how deep the socio-economic crisis is. So it's really an institutional arrangement. You should actually be having this thing emerging out of NEDLAC. NEDLAC is where the social partners are brought together institutionally. But, the government is supposed to have taken the lead on this. And Ramaphosa, you'll see in almost every major speech, he makes reference to the social compact, but with little clarity and little effort towards finalizing the social compact, which is what it would do. It would actually go a long way towards, dealing with the effects of the crisis. By some kind of agreement between the social parties about how they would approach and deal with particular problems as they emerge between the employers and the employees, the state, what's happening in the townships, etc. A comprehensive social compact involves various aspects, both the capital and labor, and for example, you can see what's been happening in the black townships. To my mind, that is what is meant by a comprehensive social compact. So all these issues would have a place in a social compact, a kind of negotiating forum within which these issues are dealt with and resolutions are found by the collective inputs of labor, capital, and the state. And this is what that's precisely why Ramaphosa has been raising it, because he knows it's needed. But you have not raised what is actually the thrust of the piece, is that while he says that he has made very little effort towards formalizing this thing, but key and critical in that column is the fact that big business is saying you can't rush towards or pressurize us towards finalizing a social compact without dealing simultaneously with the operational difficulties. You can see what's been happening with infrastructure that's collapsing across the country, the rail, the ports, the harbors, and I indicated how mining companies have been particularly affected because they export minerals and metals, and the lack of this infrastructure and so many problems with it has affected their operations, their export, and in turn that affects the GDP, which has fiscal implications. So, there's layers of disadvantage that when you don't have a social compact that is agreed upon by the various social partners. But the gist of the thing is that government needs to come around to the understanding that you cannot talk about a social compact unless you get to grips with the serious infrastructural difficulties and problems big business is faced with, especially those companies that export minerals, metals, and other products to other countries, where you'd require an efficient and effective railway system, ports, harbors, and this is the infrastructure that is collapsing across the country.
So, Mr. Harvey, what do you believe has led to the president being derailed from this promise that he made in 2018 that he continues to raise, like you say, in every other address?
No, I think it's precisely because of his difficulties in getting to grips with the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, and it's Transnet in particular that stands, the target of criticism is what's been happening in Transnet. And I think Ramaphosa, you see what's happening in Eskom, you see what's happening in all other SOEs. The state has had serious problems in getting to grips and arresting the deepening crisis in the various SOEs. So that is a failure of the state. These are state-owned enterprises. They're not private companies. And it's the failure of the state to have reined in. And you can see what Transnet and Eskom now is becoming clear. This is what's been happening for 10 to 15 and more years. It's an accumulation of failures to have reined in and dealt with the SOEs, of which Eskom and Transnet are just two of the key, because of the nature of the infrastructure that they handle. They're so pivotal to an effective and efficient economy, and for, these companies especially who export minerals, metals, and other products to other countries, abroad.
Well, certainly, I mean, we've seen more often than not when CEOs of organizations give organizational reports of late in South Africa, the recurring theme of the hindrances that they face are, like you say, the energy crisis, the corruption, and most importantly, the transportation systems that we are faced with as a country. Do you believe that government is being honest with regards to their part in terms of accountability and the responsibility in having organizations be able to successfully do business?
No, to the contrary, and I mean the evidence for that indictment is all around us. I mean, I just this afternoon had to travel to Rosebank. I mean, the roads are in the worst condition they've ever been in. Joburg was formed in October 1886, well over a century. It is the worst infrastructural crisis in the city of Johannesburg, which is supposed to be the most powerful, richest city on the African continent, ever. Can you believe it? I mean, the infrastructure was world class. The only problem with racism, apartheid, was that black people never enjoyed we've got the worst, and it's a very unfortunate and a severe indictment on ANC rule that this worst infrastructural crisis happens under ANC rule. You never had this during the darkest days of apartheid. We had the best world-class infrastructure. I mean, generally, everything worked except that racism was the biggest obstacle. And now everything has collapsed under ANC black majority rule,
Well, I mean, in February this year, the president has cited some social compact gains. He mentions a few: the fight against COVID-19, the Solidarity Fund in ending GBV by investing in certain sectors such as the textile sector, the agricultural sector. Are we not making any inroads with regards to social compact in this country?
No, but you see, this that Ramaphosa sings the praises of is very selective. This is what he does. We're not saying that no progress has been made at all. There has been. But you need a fundamental thrust. You need NEDLAC, which is where these social partners come together. If you think it's been sufficient, why do you think he's raising the need for a comprehensive social compact for 5 years? Because he knows that is not what we've got. And so the instances that you refer to are indications, but much, much more and much more concerted effort is required from the state in particular. Business and labor, I think would sooner come to the party if the initiative, the state, the ruling party, that is where you got to get your thrust for the formation of a social compact from. And this is where the biggest problems are. I mean, because although Labour doesn't talk much about it, if they are invited to, forums that finalizes the social compact, they will make their presence felt, and particularly business, because of all the social partners. There's no doubt, and you only find it in the newspapers, that business, the nature of business, especially companies which exports minerals, metals, and other products. And what's been happening with Transnet at the ports and harbors and terminals. Richards Bay is one example, glaring example, how it has billions have been lost in revenue, taxation, over the past few years because of what's been happening at Transnet, So I think Ramaphosa is not being honest with the problems that he and the state is experiencing with the SOEs, and that is largely why I think his progress has been hampered in the finalization of a social compact because of the serious crisis and the corruption, incompetence and this mismanagement that we've seen across every SOE in this country. So there's no doubt that I think deep down that is his biggest obstacle and hindrance. And they don't know how to get to grips with what has happened to the SOEs, because an efficient, effective SOEs is critical to a social compact. You cannot have a social compact if your SOEs, and which is also critical to development and this very developmental state they talk about, the heart of it is efficient and effective SOEs. And it has fallen apart. You can just see what's happening in this country. Every SOE is gone to, it's a mess, at the moment.
Most certainly. You also make mention of organized labor unions. What role or lack thereof do you feel they have played in getting us to where we are?
No, they've played a part. I indicated in the column, and I had to do it, though I come from COSATU past myself. I've been active there for a number of years. But, COSATU has been beset by serious internal problems. You see the expulsion of NUMSA and Harvey 2015, and since then, it's been down road, all the time. But there's other trade unions, FEDUSA, NACTU, all of them really have not pulled their weight. I think partly because they're facing lots of, these technologies, fourth industry has reorganized work. They're facing many challenges, and not least of all, the investment companies that they have formed that has become itself, prone to corruption, mismanagement, theft of workers' monies, etc. It's a whole lot of stuff. But, a crisis is a moment when you need to strive towards as comprehensive a social compact as you can. It's crying out for that. And this is why I penned that piece, because it seems that the state, despite talking about it, has made little effort towards a finalization of a social compact, which I believe will go a long way towards dealing with this worst crisis we have ever had in post-apartheid South Africa, man.
And do you believe that the 2024 elections would be one place where the ANC in particular will feel the wrath of not keeping to this social compact?
No, they're going to feel the wrath of the electorate, less because they're not keeping to a social compact which has been, not been finalized really and formalized. But I'll tell you why they're going to get a hiding, I think, really in next year's election. And I think they know it right from the top. They know it is the load shedding crisis. The load shedding crisis, the electricity crisis, and alongside it, I'm sure you've seen it, water, sanitation, sewage systems are collapsing across the country. So alongside this load shedding crisis, electricity, you have got water, sanitation, the roads, sewage, everything is collapsing. That is the hard facts. You just need to travel on the roads and go and see what's happening. If you think it's bad in Joburg, go to Kimberley, go to Orange Free State. Oh, it's much worse in those places, So I think really the opposition would be looking forward to 2004, because never has the ANC been more crisis-ridden as it is at the moment. And I can tell you now, the electorate, I believe, is going to punish the ANC next year. Primarily because of the Eskom load shedding crisis. There are many other things, water, sanitation, but altogether there you have got, the major factors which I think is going to lead to either a very poor turnout, which is what has been the trend of the past few elections. People are so demoralized, that they stay away from the polls.
Most certainly.
You've had big stayaways from the polls in the past decade in South Africa. And I'll tell you, I think the disillusionment and demoralization amongst the masses is now deeper than ever before an election. So we have to see what's going to happen, but when there's no feasible alternative, the masses, instead of going for another party that they might not have too much faith in, like the DA, for example, they stay away from the polls. That's how they register their protest,
Of course. Mr. Harvey, that's all the time that we have for this evening. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us and speaking on that opinion piece that you penned. That was political analyst Ebrahim Harvey speaking to us there about the social compact that South Africa